Hello and welcome to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be having a look at the new OHUHU brush tip markers. These markers are alcohol based with the brush tip, unlike the previous model that had the bullet and chisel nibs. I've actually not used either of these markers before, so I'm pretty excited to be trying these ones out. So I'm just going to unpackage these markers. This is how it was shipped to me from Amazon. I have to say that these arrived quite quickly, a lot quicker than the time estimator, which was nice. This set me back $69.99 Australian dollars with free shipping, and there are 48 markers in this set, so that equals to be around $1.45 per marker, which I think is an excellent deal. The first thing I noticed when I unpackaged this was that the bag had a little tear up the top, as you can see the markers poking through. Nothing too concerning for me personally, as I'll probably pop these markers into another case, and there didn't seem to be any damage to the actual markers themselves. The other thing I could do is I could stitch the bag back together if I wanted to take these markers on the go. Anyway, let's have a look at these bad boys up close. So looking at these markers, the first impression I have is that there seems to be a decent range of colours. However, there aren't really any pastel colours, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. As you can see here, we have the chisel nib, perfect for filling in larger areas. And flipping over to the other side, we have the coveted brush nib. The markers have little lips on the caps that stop them rolling off your desk, which is a nice feature. Unfortunately, the colour and number is not labelled on the barrel, only the caps, so that's something to be aware of. What I have here is a blank swatch card to swatch the colours out. I created this for future reference so that I can see the colours in a real life application. This is actually available as a free download on my website. I'll have a link in the description if you want to check that one out. I have found that the inks didn't smudge for either an inkjet or a toner printer, so you should be fine to print with either of those. One thing I'll say on that is if you can print on whatever paper you're going to use with your markers, that would be best, as you'll know exactly what your markers are going to do and what colour you'll get. Now, as I said earlier, there aren't really any pastel or light colours in this set, as you'll see once I've swatched this one out. Perhaps OHUHU will add more colours to the range in the future, I'm not sure, but in the meantime I would recommend adding a few pastel colours from another brand to accompany this set if you think you'll need them. OHUHU is still a fairly new company, but they seem quite good to me. They appear to take feedback on board and try to improve their products whilst keeping them at a very affordable price. Now, OHUHU did include a little printed swatch card, but I still think swatching out your colours is best practice for accuracy. They also included in my bag here a 10% off offer on a future purchase and some answers to some frequently asked questions on the back. So if you happen to have any issues, it seems that they will take good care of you. So that's a really nice touch. The other thing I wanted to mention whilst I harp on about the importance of swatching is that the caps aren't an accurate reflection of the colour, as you can see here. This is not me picking on OHUHU, this is just fairly common with almost any art supply. It's very difficult to get an accurate colour on plastic or when it's printed, so this is just why I go on about swatching. Another thing I noticed was that the colour identifier on the labels has already started wearing off the caps, and as it's not printed on the barrels, this could be an issue. So just be mindful of that. You may want to label the barrels yourself somehow. I am going to do a quick comparison against the Copic and the Winsor and Newton brush markers. In all honesty, I really don't think it's a fair comparison against these markers as there's such a vast price difference. So first we'll have a look at the Winsor and Newton brush markers. These have a brush and chisel nib, and they also have the little lip to stop them rolling across your desk. But the feature I like most about the design is the pointy cap to identify the brush end visually. Just makes it a little bit easier. These are labelled with stickers on the barrel and on the chisel end, and these retail for around $10.50 each in Australia. Next we have the Copic markers. We have the sketch marker. These have an oval shaped barrel with the colour and number printed on the barrel with a little brush tip and a little chisel icon to reflect which end is which. The number and colour is also printed on both caps, and I believe that there are 358 colours in the Copic range, but only the original and the sketch are available in all of those colours. Chow range, which we're looking at now, I believe comes in around 214 colours. The colour and number is printed on the barrel only, not the lids. One of the things that makes Copic the holy grail of all alcohol markers is the fact that the markers are refillable and the nibs are replaceable, whereas a lot of the other brands don't have this as an option. Copic markers are on the pricier end of the spectrum, with the Chows retailing in Australia for around $7.45 each, and the sketch and original markers are around $11.25 each. One thing to note about the Copic original markers, which we're looking at now, these little square barreled markers, is that they are the bullet nib and the chisel nib, not the brush nib. These markers are also labelled the same as the Copic sketch, the oval barreled markers I just showed you, they're labelled the same. Now, comparing the actual brush tips, I found that the Winsor and Newton tips are quite flexible. The OHUHUs appear to be a little more firm, but they might become more flexible over time. The Copic brush tips seem to be kind of in the middle to me, flexibility wise. Not quite as flexible as the Winsor and Newton, but more flexible than the OHUHUs. Now, whilst we're comparing these markers and looking at OHUHUs being a cheaper alternative, I thought it would be good to have a look at the different types of paper and to look at some cheaper alternatives here as well. This is Express-It blending card. This is 250 GSM, very smooth paper, perfect for using with your alcohol-based markers. This one's acid-free and you can also print on it, so if you had a design that you'd done digitally and just wanted to print it and colour it in, this is a good option. I'm just going to show you some of the art I've created with this paper using my Copic markers. This is a mermaid I did for Mermaid this year, and also the local Australian Copic colour challenge, which was blue and the theme was under the sea. And then I've also done this one also for a Copic colouring challenge, which was fire and ice. As you can see, the markers do come through to the other side of the paper. You are going to find this with pretty much any paper that you use your alcohol-based markers with, but I am going to show you an alternative that doesn't do that later on. Now, if this is something that's not readily accessible to you, or if this is something that's a little out of your price range, then there are some more affordable options I have found. And these ones I've also found that they perform the same. So this A4 premium digital paper. It's also ultra smooth white paper and comes in 250 GSM, although the other one is 160. But it does come in 250 GSM. The 250 GSM does feel slightly thinner than the Express-It paper, but this is a cheaper alternative and I found it works perfectly fine. I bought these at Officeworks. This J. Burroughs paper currently sells for $9.98 for 125 sheets, so that's around 8 cents per sheet. And the Colour Copy, which is the other brand, currently sells for $16.45 for 125 sheets, so that's around 13 cents per sheet. If you can't find these brands at your local office supply store, just look for something similar, something that says premium digital paper or premium digital copy paper, and in the highest GSM that you can find. I'm going to colour this little floral image later on in this video, and I use that J. Burroughs paper for that one. When it comes to using alcohol markers, basically you just want to use the smoothest paper you can find, ultra smooth paper. So Bristol here is a good example. This one here is made by Strathmore. We have it in a smooth finish and a vellum finish, but both of these you can use with markers, and I'm going to use these books later on in the video to do some drawings with the OHUHU markers. This is another option, which is just the Bristol pad. This one here I actually haven't used yet. Comes in A3 size, but it's really thick paper and it's very smooth. As you can see, this one's 300 GSM, so just that little bit thicker than the other papers. On the other end of the spectrum, we have this 70 GSM paper, which is also marker paper. It's very thin, but that can be an advantage if you wanted to trace your sketches onto the paper then to colour in with your markers. The only thing I'd recommend is before you frame it, just make sure you put some white paper behind it so you don't have that see-through image issue coming through. As you can see, the inks always come through to the other side of the paper. The only exception to this rule I found is the render sketch paper. This comes in a sketch pad and sketchbooks as well, and it does claim that the ink will not come through to the other side of the paper, as in the back of the paper, which, to be honest, I have only ever seen it perform like that in this book. I'm just going to show you this sketch I did last year for Inktober. This one I've coloured with Copic markers, so I've used some liners and I've used some Finetec Gold, the mica paints. I'm just going to flip this over so you can see that this did not bleed through to the back, and the paper is actually quite a bit thinner than some of the other ones I've shown you here, aside from that 70 GSM. The only thing about this paper that might put some people off is that it's not pure white. It seems to be this kind of grey colour. I'm just going to show you the Express It blending card next to this paper so you can see the difference between the pure white of it and then the very sort of off-white grey kind of colour of the render paper. I honestly think it depends on what would bother you more over time. Would you be bothered by the paper being that slight grey colour compared to the white, or are you the kind of person that likes to utilize every inch of your paper, including the back, so you would want to use a sketchbook that contained paper that's going to allow you to draw on both sides with no issues? It's just something else for you to consider. This paper is a bit more pricey than some of the other ones. I bought this one on eBay. I'm not entirely sure how much it cost me, but it's just something else to consider. As I said, that paper is quite a bit thinner than the Express It as well, so it just really seems like black magic to me that it doesn't come through to the other side. So now that we've looked at some of the different types of papers to use with your alcohol-based markers, I think it's time to move on and do some drawings using these beautiful OHUHU markers. One last thing I'll say on papers is definitely not to use watercolor paper with them. Watercolor paper is designed to soak up some of the water that you would use with your watercolors so that you have more time to blend. So what this is going to do with your alcohol-based markers is kind of more suck the ink out of your markers, and you don't really want to be wasting them just by the paper sucking it out of your markers. So definitely try to avoid that if you can. This first sketch I'm doing here is in the Strathmore Bristol Smooth sketchbook. I wanted to test out some darker skin tones with this drawing, which these markers can accommodate quite well. If you like drawing people and characters, then you may want to invest in a few lighter skin tones for your Caucasian skin tones, as the lightest tone in this set that is appropriate for skin is still quite dark coloured, and even when looking at the pink tones, the lightest pink is more of a highlighter pink than a natural light pink tone. Overall, I'm really happy with these markers. I still think that these would make a great set for beginners or anyone wanting to try alcohol-based markers. I thought they performed really well. The only real negatives I found were so far the limited colour range. As I said, they might expand the range later down the track. And the other issue was just with the colour labels wearing off. And so far I've only really noticed that on I think 3 markers, so this might not really be an issue. Maybe it was just unlucky with those ones, or maybe it is, so just something to be mindful of. So aside from those 2 things, which is really kind of being nitpicky, I really don't think they're huge issues, they're definitely manageable. I think this is a really great set, and especially when you consider the price for around $1.45 Australian dollars per marker, you really can't beat that, especially for what you're getting. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you need to choose whatever's going to work for you when it comes to making purchases for art supplies, what's within your price range and what you think will work well for you. For these next drawings I'm going to do, I did use a Copic colourless blender, which didn't help lighten the colours as much as I'd first hoped. I also purchased a 6-colour skin tone set from my local art store. These are on sale for $20 for the 6 markers, which obviously still isn't as cheap as the OHUHU, but will assist with achieving some of the lighter tones for the skin that I was aiming for. But not only could you use these for skin, you could use them for, you know, sandy beaches or trees, wildlife, that kind of thing. I laid down some of the colourless blender first to try and blend out my lightest OHUHU skin tone colour, but it didn't really seem to get as light as I would have hoped, so I did use my new skin markers just for the skin of this drawing. I still use some of the OHUHU as well, just for those darker shadow areas, but for the clothes and everything and the hair, I definitely use the OHUHUs. I think that these markers would serve crafters or card makers really well with its beautiful range of bright colours. This is a digital stamp design that I created and I really enjoyed painting it with my new markers. The colours are so pretty and I just wanted to use as many of the colours as I could. Let me know down in the comments below if learning more about my digital stamps is something you'd be interested in, I do intend to do some videos on this, on some card making things in the future, but just let me know if it's something you would want to see on this channel. I'm going to leave you with one last tip in this video. If you're a mixed media artist who likes using their markers as well as watercolor, or if you're the kind of artist who likes to make the most of their sketchbooks by using both sides of the paper, then this may be of interest to you. As I've said in this video, alcohol-based markers always bleed through to the other side like it's done here. It didn't appear on the next sheet of paper, but clearly this side is not usable. But if you can get your hands on some Watercolor Ground, as I've got here, then you can make this page usable again. This is Watercolor Ground from Daniel Smith. This is the white color. It also comes in pearl, gold and black, so you could use gouache paints on it, or if you're using the black you could also use some of your shimmer paints. I'm going to paint 3 coats just to cover all of that ink that's bled through to the other side. I applied 3 coats of this Daniel Smith Watercolor Ground to this page, and as you'll see it becomes white again, so it will add a different texture to the paper, but it will make it usable. Leave a comment down below if you want to see me talk more about this in a future video, as this video was already quite long. I didn't want to make this one even longer. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that you found this video helpful if you're looking at starting your alcohol marker collection or growing your collection. But don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you want to see more content from me. And as always, have a lovely day. Bye.